So welcome everyone, both the people who are on the call and the rest of you who are watching the stream. This is a BoF session, so we're hoping for discussion of different topics, both topics we've thought of and ideally even topics that we haven't yet realized we should be discussing, but you can join on the pad and by IRC and hopefully we'll get some discussion going. Before that, we have a few slides to run through just for anyone who hasn't been interacting with this topic before, if you haven't been at previous DebConf sessions or haven't been on the IRC channel, just to say what we're talking about. If I can get the slide to move. No. So, no, it's big. Okay. So what are Debian local groups about? We have many groups in different places in the world. We could say some of the most useful aspects of them is about how we can help people enter the Debian community, but also how we can keep people who are already somewhat in the community active. That for a lot of people, if they can have something with other people local to them, then that's a good way to encourage them to really feel much more involved and more incentive to actually carry on working and get more involved in other things. Some of the groups also try to encourage Debian use by people in the area where they are, though that's kind of an optional thing. There are other groups which are really developer focused. So to distinguish these from other types of groups in Debian, we have a lot of things you could call groups which are around specific technical topics or non-technical topics, obviously including specific mailing lists or packages and so on. We also have groups which are focused on specific languages. So we have, for example, Debian user mailing lists with different language communities. But when we're talking about local groups, we're really thinking of ones which are focused on specific locations. Whether that can be a very narrow location or a much wider one. There's in the Debian wiki, you can find a page where some of these groups that exist or have existed in the past are listed. If you take a very optimistic view of those, then you can say that we're kind of, well, not exactly covering the world very well, but covering certain regions of the world quite reasonably. But of course, the kind of problem at the moment for any of this, as unfortunately last year it still is the pandemic situation, most of these groups are rather frozen currently. So one of the topics we should probably discuss later is how can we help groups to kind of come out of that stasis and get active again as face-to-face events become more viable in different places. We have very few requirements to be listed as a Debian local group, and it's currently rather informal that people just declare they're setting one up. We might reasonably say that to count as a Debian local group, you should be at least focused on Debian. Although that could be as part of a wider free software remit potentially, but we probably don't want groups which are just Debian as a purely one aspect of a much, much wider thing. To count, they should have some kind of local focus, but again, some of the existing groups are specific cities. Some would list themselves as being countrywide. For the ones that are making wider locations, it's probably worth noting that these are not meant to be territorial claims. So if I was to create, Debian Antarctica tomorrow, then someone in a specific Antarctic base could still set up a Debian group for that base. It's perfectly valid to have overlapping locations that they're trying to target. To be listed on these pages as well, the intention is that these are groups which are holding events. Again, obviously in the last year or two, where they have been having events, those generally have been online. And again, we don't currently have any process to kick groups off as they become inactive, though maybe we should. But again, the intention is that you're somehow reaching out to people in a specific area. And another point which we might want to discuss more what it really means in practice later on, but we'd intend that the groups follow the kind of behaviors that we would expect in Debian, including following the Debian Code of Conduct in their normal dealings. For communicating with the people who are working on Debian local groups, rather than individual groups, we have various channels of communication. Most of things have been going through our IRC channel. We also have a mailing list, although it hasn't been very active so far. And then there's this wiki page I was also already pointing to. We're always open if someone wants to come along and volunteer their time to make a prettier website. You know, we can have a map and interactive events pages and so on. But so far, no one's really wanted to spend a lot of time doing that. Maybe to stop me just rabbiting on, maybe Nattie could say something about the kind of help that we intend to offer to individual local groups.
Oh, put me on the spot, will you? So the advice for forming groups, obviously, see whether you have people. Always a good start. Be sure to get the word out. If you haven't got lots of people, see if there are places where you can find people. Sorry, caught slightly off guard here. I will just riff on what's on the slides here. Yeah. Places to host things. Cafes are nice. Make sure they're not noisy, because I think a lot of people would appreciate not having to also engage extra input filters. Yeah, obviously make sure venues are accessible. Make sure they're easy to find. So, you know, third hallway on the left upstairs is not ideal. Yeah, what else? Swag is a thing. We're working on it. More swag will appear eventually. I'll probably end up coordinating a fair bit of it. So, right. And the other thing, potentially money towards other expenses. Obviously, make a general inquiry on the mailing list. Any specific things would go on the alias that we have set up. You know.
Yeah, I mean, for these, because things have been rather frozen, we haven't been handing out money in practice, but certainly there has been a DPL message that money is available if it's going to be spent usefully.
Yeah.
So we can imagine, in principle, it might be possible to do something like pay for venue expenses in certain cases, although that would have to be worked out in detail. Again, in principle, we might be able to, you know, if you have, so if imagine someone wants to set up one of these groups in a university, for example, then I know in university scenarios, people always appreciate free food. So again, in principle, there might be some money to pay for something there. But really, we need to kind of start with people asking for money and then see what happens.
And also we need to sort of have engaged with the people asking, I think.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm trying to raise things that we might want to discuss more detail about later on. So what else? Well, that's really the points I was minimally trying to get through before opening discussion. I'm sure there are more things we should be discussing than this, but we already mentioned this question of how can we get groups active again? In general, there's a kind of related thing or overlapping question of how do we encourage people to do more local groups again? I know that as of this month in many places in the world, it's still difficult to arrange face-to-face meetings, which makes these things much more tricky to get people excited about. But hopefully there'll be a time when it's easier. And at that point, so a lot of people will be quite fed up with the number of online meetings they've been having. So I think if we could have more local and face-to-face events, there will actually be quite an audience for that at that moment. And again, what else can people think of that we could do to support local groups, or just generally what other ideas people have of what we should be doing, or ideas of open questions that they think of. I will stop sharing these slides so that I can actually see the other discussion participants rather than speaking at them. So does anyone who's connected to the call want to start either raising a different question or addressing any of the questions that we've mentioned so far?
Hi, everybody. Here in Brazil, we still have just meetings online, so we can't meet ourselves on local meetings. But we have some experience with local groups. Some of these local groups, they are from cities, and some of them are organizing specific activities. For instance, the group of Brasilia City has organized the meetings to learn how to package. And one day of the week, and other group from other city organized the very similar activity in another day. So when someone come to ask us how they can learn how to package, we usually say, you can join in the Brasilia group, for instance, and talk with them, and they will help you because they are doing this meetings online to help people. So there's something nice because it gives a something for a local group to do, some focus, especially now that we are just online. And the other groups are making other activities too, like in Curitiba. The group is studying how to use Git. It's another example, and so on. So it's a good idea, something like that.
I mean, in Brazil, where there's been quite a lot of group activity in the past, do you have any comment on how what you think worked better to get people interested or involved?
Yeah, on the past we basically have groups for state. Each state should be one group, but now we are changing, and we have groups for cities. I think it's more local because people can join in physical places after the pandemic. Not now yet, but it's more realistic meeting themselves in local physical places by cities, and we are trying to talk with people from these oldest groups, saying, hey, look, we have some groups working now, maybe you can activate your group again in your city, now thinking in your city. And some of them it's coming and they're working together with us. And Debian Brazil, as a national group, has been like a umbrella for this local group, helping especially to make contact with Debian International, because most of the people in local groups don't have the habit. They don't talk with Debian International, and it's something that we are always encouraging and say, hey, don't stay just here in Brazil. If you can talk here or write a little in English, it's a good idea. We talk with people from abroad, talk with international people to know how they work, to know more about Debian and something like that, if you can speak or write in English. But we are basically doing these bridges between local national groups and the international Debian. And one idea that I was thinking, it's about encourage local groups to organize a mini DebConfs on the future, maybe national mini DebConfs. I think it's a good idea to encourage local groups for that, to create some movement.
Yeah.
Mute. Yes, sorry. I think small local conferences might be the way forward for a lot of people in the future anyway. So I think getting a solid basis of that seems like a really good idea. Also swag, but I think that's a topic for later.
Does anyone else from the call participants have experiences from their own local region that they can comment on what they think works or not?
So, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I'm Shruti from India. So, regarding the mini DebConfs, national mini DebConf, we had one in Jan, and that was a grand success. We had around 40, more than 40 talks or something in 6 languages. I'm not sure, 6 or 7 languages.
Before the pandemic, we used to organize a camp, even smaller than. Sorry?
We have some network issue, maybe.
I'd say just go ahead then.
Yeah, she's back.
You're back on.
Voila. You're on mute. I think I need to fetch my postcard.
So, as I was speaking, we had good success with the mini DebCon, and we got a lot more people involved with the Debian with that mini DebConf, and they are also like contributing to this DebConf. So it's like gradually that did help us get new people connected to the international Debian community, and it was good. So yeah, we should have more such events. So yeah, I agree with Phil.
I think Francisco asked you to talk.
Yeah, it's something I've been thinking. I'm not sure about how a local group is defined, if it's based on geography or language, or maybe it could be some other criteria, because
I think the answer there is yes. Any of those.
okay, but could we have some more criteria, like, for example, a university being a local group, like the Debian user group of the University of São Paulo, for example?
Absolutely. Yeah,
I think
absolutely. Very much
definitely
so.
things like university is a good case.
Okay. Just even if it's a group like it's not directly related to Debian, then it might, if it has activities related to Debian, might be considered a Debian local group in a way, But what I was really thinking is how can we get activities restarted once once it's safe to be in person with each other again. And I was thinking, we are quite likely not the only type of community that's going to have this issue. So we might be a good idea to try to make joint events with other groups, if they are related to free software or open source or something like that. That might not only make things easier to organize, but also we could have a source of manpower, so to speak. People interested in free software that might end up joining Debian because they end up in a meeting that has something to do with something else they do, and then it happens to be together with us.
I mean, I agree. I mean, again, in the university scenario, I think it would be perfectly reasonable if, for example, there's a existing, whatever, some type of relevant computer club in the university. It would be perfectly reasonable even for us, that we arrange a Debian event with someone from the Debian community with them and give them some swag or some pizza or something. If it gets again, for that kind of audience, it might be useful. But again, this obviously needs to be agreed case by case if there's money being spent. But again, to get a group formed in something like a university, probably at minimum starting from other existing groups, it makes sense, even if it subsequently was to become independent.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I'm not even thinking about spending money on it or on anything. I'm just thinking about organization and logistics and getting people involved. And then money would be something that comes later.
And equally, in some universities, a recognized association in the university will be able to book rooms, for example, easily. Whereas if you just set up a new Debian group, it may be hard to do those things, some of the practical aspects, yeah.
Help out with the Debian Nordics Sweden group, and it's nothing much has been happening now because of the corona. But we moved our chat from Telegram to Matrix, and when we moved that, there was a lot of activity. Now there's a little bit less. It goes in waves. But me and Helio tried to have a release party for the Bullseye release, but we pretty much came up with that pretty spontaneous. So like 2 or 3 days before, wrote in the wiki. So we were like the 2 organizers and then a visitor drinking a couple of beers and talking. And probably when Corona is over, we usually do stuff around conferences. And in Gothenburg, there is FOSS North every year, but that's been online now due to the pandemic. But probably we'll be going there when it's back in real life. Because seeing each other in a common conference with Linux people makes Debian people, other people go there.
Yeah, I mean, I think actually one general issue for anyone trying to start having events in a place which will now be everyone because there's been no face-to-face events happening effectively, is just having the kind of confidence that even if it's only 2 or 3 people initially, that's actually maybe what you need to do first to build up having bigger events later. That often if people, maybe the first time you try to organize something, it may not be very visible, people don't know about it. But if people see online there's been events before in a location, then they're more likely to find the new events as well when they happen in future.
Yeah, here in Brazil, we try to encourage the groups to organize some activity in Debian Days. So I believe the future Debian Day in 2022 will be very important if we can join together, and we will try to have a lot of groups, even if they are not like official local groups, but encourage people to meet each other in August next year, especially if you have a good year. So I think we can try to use this data, Debian Day, for a special day next year to encourage more local groups to organize something there, even if they are not official, but people can join together around the world.
I mean, I think also now that we've all become more expert in different video conferencing systems, it's also easier that even if we start having real face-to-face events, it may be easy to have some kind of global collaborative thing as well at the same time. So again, even in a location where someone's not very sure if they will get many people turning up locally, they can still have a small number of people locally, but joining a call or a presentation or something that's on a wider basis.
I would like to ask to Elena if she can repeat what she said about the camp that you have there. Could you repeat, please?
I'm lagged. Yes, I'm still lagged. I was saying that before the pandemic, we used to have a small camp. So we had about 15 people from Debian, from international Debian, doing work on whatever, like at DebConf, so self-organized and everything. And it was very low effort to organize. And one thing that we tried to do was to have a dinner one of the days where we also invited the local community. So to try and help local people interact with the international community on a very small scale. So that meant making things easier to organize, easier to get into. Probably for local people also less. I mean, easier to get to than a full mini DebConf, where probably people from Debian tend to talk with other people from Debian, and the people from the local community probably tend to remain on their own. While with just 15 people from Debian and 10 people from the local community, it's easier to get together.
Is it now camp?
Sorry, you asked if it was Snow Camp?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. It's another.
Yes. The idea originally came from the Sun Camp in Spain.
Okay, cool. There is a question on the page. What local groups can expect from the project? A map to report the exist, funds to their local events, for instance, meetups, DebConf, national, local, language-oriented camp, and etc. Someone can answer?
All of these are potentially things, yes. I think we don't have an exhaustive list of what we would provide, because at the moment we don't really have we haven't really strongly decided what is excluded, but we are, again, the first thing is just that groups can add themselves to this wiki page, and at the moment that's a very informal process, although there was an intention to clean up the page and make sure that groups were really still alive, but obviously at the moment it's a bit sad to clear off almost all groups for having been rather inactive for the pandemic. We want to kind of give people a chance to come back from that. For the funding question, again, as we've said, we are potentially open for any of the things mentioned, but obviously if there was a huge number of the groups asking for money all the time, then people would probably start to set stricter criteria. But again, the DPL is fundamentally who decides about money spending, and the policy has been to be quite open in principle. So we really need people to come forward asking, if they want funding, they need to come forward asking for it and see if it gets accepted. But people shouldn't be scared to ask, at least. I don't know what other people want to add in respect of that.
Another question is being typed right now.
Somebody could read it out as it's being typed.
Seems like a challenge with such a wide audience target, ranging from developers to basic users. Would a local group focus on development and packaging, or try and install fast to get new users of Debian? You're muted.
At the moment, there are groups in each category. Again, if there were a lot of groups very active, we might want to distinguish them better in the naming and have more specific names for the two categories. But at the moment, we're just kind of loosely putting things together. So at the moment, both types are listed in the same place. Some of them are have been much more focused on trying to organize effectively outreach events or run install fests or these kind of things, make people outside their group, the actual group members, aware of Debian or free software, while other groups are definitely much more a social meeting for some people who are working on components of Debian. And at the moment, we don't have a distinct naming for the two things.
In Sweden, the group has mostly been a social group with the mailing list and the chat channel, and seeing each other on release parties on Debian days and eating pizza, drinking beer, and seeing each other at FSCons. That was the biggest open source conference in Gothenburg, but when they stopped, FOSS North took over instead. So Glyn, mostly already Debian developer, keeping in touch with each other here.
I would say that, I'm sorry.
Go on.
Go ahead. I would say that what the focus of a local group should be depends on what the local group, where the local group is, or what does it represent. I mean, it's the problem of bootstrapping a new group, you know. To get a group going, you need to answer some kind of need that people have. And on the other hand, to know the needs of people, you need them to be a part of your group to some degree or another. So I guess it depends a lot on what you expect of a group and what you think is required of a group in specific context where you are trying to form a new group, or where your group already exists but needs more activity.
I think one thing it would be good if these local groups can give a step forward and be more than just a group of users, and they can be a group of contributors. I think we need to have in mind always encourage people to not just use Debian. Yes, this is very important, but more than use Debian, you can contribute to Debian, even in translation, especially in translation for non-English countries. I think it's important to encourage that, because everybody likes to use Debian, but it always we keep in mind that people can contribute to Debian on translation or packaging or in other or organize events. So you can contribute to international Debian with activities like that, more than be just a user.
Yeah, I agree with Paulo 100%. And I was actually thinking of something like that a few days ago when I saw a video of a friend of mine who has a YouTube channel about different Linux distros, and he was doing a review of Bullseye, and he was saying, "Oh, it's pretty good, but it lacks a lot on translation. There's a lot of documentation that's still in English and should be translated, and that's something that pretty much anybody can contribute. Anybody that has some knowledge of English and has the time to put into translate things and to review things, and that's a perfectly good way to participate. And the more the merrier when it comes to Debian user groups. But I mean, when we talk about user groups, that's not really what it means, because there's a lot of Debian users that use Debian, but they are not exclusive to Debian, or they're not interested in contributing anything. That's just there to use it. There's a tool they use at work or something like this. That person is perfectly welcome in a user group, but they have everything figured out for themselves. If they have some kind of question, then they come and we answer, and that's it. But when we talk about the Debian user group, I mean, we're probably talking about power users, people that like to tinker with the distribution and mess around with packaging or translate stuff or do some other kind of work inside the distribution. That's more of a contribution than just using it.
I agree. Translation is important. Not everyone is fluent in English, and it's good that everyone could use the operating system in your own language.
That's what universal means.
I see another question on IRC of thinking of the Debian local groups team. What kind of contributions do we need, or are we looking for? Maybe someone else wants to answer how people can help the kind of centrally to help other local groups. I see. Nattie, do you have any what's the plan around swag at the moment? I'm sure in that there's something we're going to need help from lots of people.
I've had a few suggestions, but Obviously, suggestions are always welcome. I luckily now have people about who are happy to handle swag. And yeah, requests for swag to be addressed to the mailing list, I suppose. Also suggestions of swag, like if you have an item that's particularly interesting and would be considerably more economical to make in a larger quantity, sharing is caring. So we'll quite happily sort of arrange to make that available elsewhere as well. So,
I mean, as a general point, we're having regular meetings on the IRC channel. So people who are interested in the meta topic of local groups, certainly, or people who are trying to set up or make more active a group in their area are very welcome to come to the IRC channel and either discuss between times or in the specific meeting times. Some of the co-participants have still been very quiet. Is there anything people think of that they can ask or share in the remaining time?
I think I'm going to have another go at doing more of a census of who's actually active and who's actually responsive. Because even groups that are inactive, hopefully, if there's still the desire for a group, those responsible would be responsive. So,
no, I agree. Even in some cases, just having a group listed, even if not much is really happening, can still be encouraging for someone in that region who sees then, yes, there are other people that they can reach out to or meet with.
you're not alone in your Debianite affliction.
Yeah. And there are listed some groups which are purely intending to have meetings in response to requests, effectively. So, for example, when someone else is traveling through the region.
Yeah, speaking of helping the local groups team, I was checking the pad, and there's one thing that is an idea that has been floating around for some time, which is a map on a website that shows where the local groups are, and we need someone to actually do the work of doing that map and doing the code and making the magic to things to happen. So that's a way to contribute to.
Yeah.
Random suggestion in the last minute. Maybe stickers with like the Debian logo in the country's color could be something, if it's not like complete.
I think the biggest contribution that people could make is actually just to talk to us. It would be really delightful to hear from people who are not sitting in this call, what they would like us to do, what support they could use. We don't bite very much, and I think we're reasonably approachable. So please get in touch. We should probably also tell people how.
I think should ask her to talk. Not sure. I think she got up her hand.
Yeah, I was like going to talk regarding that SPAC thing. So actually, now the pin thing, Nattie knows. The problem in India is like importing even small things are not going to be an easy task. So for India, at least, I think we might have to go for the local swag thing. The international ones might not, shipping it to India might not be a good idea. So I just wanted to add there when she was mentioning the swag.
Yeah, I guess it's important to be aware of local conditions, but we will do a best effort anyway.
Yeah, I mean, when we speak of swag, one of the best way to contribute is, can you help us make it? Like contacting local vendors, people that can make mugs, T-shirts, head hats, and all kinds of things. Pens and I don't know, notepads, whatever. Anyway, you can contribute to actually make the swag that you want, right? We have it pretty good here in Brazil because we have some very exceptional guys taking care of swag.
And I've heard of
but
the Brazilian
we
swag
are we are
being
so very lucky, and I wish we could have someone like them anywhere. I mean everywhere.
Yeah, it's Daniel Legnaro job. He's great doing that.
Lenhar é o cara.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we're at our time, are we?
Yes.
I know we'll be in trouble with video team or others if we run on too much. So
mustn't prevent people from having their break.
Exactly. Even if the break is not quite the same as at an in-person DebConf, but never mind.
Remember to take your tea break. Valhalla says so.
And I hope to see lots of discussion on IRC or other places following this. If anyone anything else they want to jump in at the last moment? Otherwise,
we have a wiki once per month on Saturday, right?
Oh, the meeting.
Yeah.
Yes, though we're currently looking to find a slightly more optimal schedule, because obviously we tried meetings, very few people engaged, but hopefully people will see us and get in touch and we can work out a good time for everybody. Again. So yes, like I said, please get in touch. We want you to take part. So obviously, we want to accommodate you with our time and yeah. Like I said, get in touch. Anyway, last word to whomever? Moray? Anybody?
I think I've spoken enough.
You don't say. Teasing. Right, okay, I think in that case, good night, everybody. Drink some tea. Talk to you later.
Thanks.
See
Bye.
you at conference.
Have a good one, guys.